But I stayed involved in city government, and some of the things in the book deal with some of the issues that I dealt with at that time, which I'll just briefly mention. One was the structure of city government, and I'm very concerned with structural issues, which a lot of people say, well, these are insider issues and nobody cares about them. But I think that the structure we work with has a determining factor on how we relate to one another, and we have to make it more comprehensible and more accessible to people. And I have some strong feelings on what direction we should go. Also, I was very committed to peace and justice issues, and at least in the case of General Electric in Burlington, that put me at odds with the Sanders administration because the mayor didn't feel that we ought to be pushing on peace conversion, that it wasn't time. Incidentally, the mayor also didn't feel it was time to form a third party until he wasn't mayor. And I wanted to push on peace conversion, and I think now we see in 1989 that this is an essential step that we need to begin taking. And I can say with some pleasure that it looks highly likely that we will finally have, in January, economic conversion legislation introduced into the state legislature. The situation has just become too serious to ignore. I also have been very concerned about limits to growth and have worked on that. And that brings me to what I consider to be the turning point in the evolution of progressive politics in Burlington, which is described in some detail in the book, which was the fight over waterfront development as personified in the Alden Plan. This brought some of the contradictions that were inherent in the Progressive Coalition's strategy for social change right to the surface, because the approach that was being taken was what I would describe in a way as a kind of a labor management approach to social change, that the capitalists, the developers, were management, and that the city was supposedly, through the mayor and others, was representing labor, if you get the metaphor. And that the idea was to strike a hard bargain with management over what should be done on behalf of the rank and file, all the rest of us. The bargain that they struck was, in the opinion of many people, a really bad bargain, which basically didn't represent any fundamental change from what had been presented 8 or 10 years before. And the result was that it fractured the Progressive Coalition and introduced a new element into city politics, which I would say is not so much the Greens, but a slow growth, and sometimes verging on anti-growth, ad hoc coalition, which the Greens have subsequently brought into some more focus and have tried to turn into a sort of a semi-party movement. But this feeling goes beyond the platform or even the efforts of a particular political group. It is a deep-rooted feeling in the city that the city is becoming out of scale. And the Alden Plan was, like the Pyramid Mall plan some years before, just too much. And people said, finally, this is too much, we don't want this. And it was rejected. And it was rejected in exactly those places which were the strongholds for progressive support. And the progressives found themselves in a tactical alliance with the Republicans and the Democrats. This was a very wrenching experience for everyone involved, and I don't think that city politics has been the same since. And many of the issues that we're dealing with today can be traced to that struggle and reflect the continuing inability to resolve that problem, to begin to reconceptualize the development posture and the development direction, and to begin to set limits to growth. Peter Clavell, in an annual report that I quote in the book, says, what are the limits to growth? He asked the question. That's good that he's asking the question. What we need to do is begin to actually answer the question, and we haven't really answered it yet. I also talk a little bit about, in the book, about the split between progressives and Greens. I'm not going to go into that now. And the fact that we, in a sense, have developed a new foreign policy in this city and what the implications of that are. Before I stop, I feel the need to say just one more thing. In recent days, I don't think any of you in the room really know much about this, but in recent days I've announced my campaign, and I've also released this book. And there was a press conference held a couple of days ago in City Hall where the members of the Green Movement with whom I feel I share many values and goals, took issue with me about my positions as expressed in the book. And they pointed to a particular page. They said, page 181. And page 181 proves that I'm really not, what I say I am, and I've contradicted myself, and that really I could be a reactionary. What page 181 says, I think the section they're referring to, is that I don't believe that you can simply solve the problem of participatory democracy by putting all the power in the hands of neighborhood assemblies. And that if you do so, given what the reality of people's lives are today, that what you're opening up is the possibility that those decisions will be made by an even smaller group than make them now, that basically people with vested interests, people from the left or from the right, struggling with each other until one or the other drops out. And it's not that I don't think that neighborhood assemblies are important. In fact, I would venture to say that I was probably the first person involved in city politics to propose this solution. I proposed it in 1976 as part of my work with the Youth Council, as part of the development of a human services perspective for the city, that the city should have a social policy and that social policy should be expressed through a decentralized and formal mechanism, such as neighborhood assemblies. And I continue to believe that, and I continue to believe that. But I don't think that neighborhood assemblies are sufficient, necessary but not sufficient, and that there are many other things which are also necessary to make a truly democratic and participatory system. One of which I've mentioned and I've worked on in the commission which studied the structure of city government is the election of commissioners. And if I ever get into office, I intend to continue to pursue that. I just wanted to add that note because I don't think it's wise to, first of all, to name call, or secondly, to put all your eggs in one basket. What you need to do if you want to make a structural reform which is going to empower people is you need to consider a number of variables, give a number of options for people to participate, and participate in ways that enhance human freedom, and also enhance democracy, but also enhance efficiency, because people want that too. People want access, they want services to be delivered, they want to have the choice to participate, but they also want to be able to trust that they can elect or select representatives who are going to deal with these things for them. I don't think that representative democracy is totally bankrupt. I think that it certainly is flawed and participation is not what it should be, but this is an educative process. And it's not simply a question of coming up with a magic formula of returning to a utopian ongoing Paris Commune to solve this problem. Maybe 100 years from now, we will again reach that point of collective consciousness, if we ever had it before. But we're not there now, and in the meantime, we need some practical solutions. And I'm hoping that this book will not simply be a good story about what happened in the past, and great old, war stories, but will also raise some fundamental questions about the kind of place we live in, the kind of city we could have, the kind of state and community we could have, and will challenge some assumptions about that, and contribute to a process of change.